I'm gonna get it, right? I'm just a moment. No, I'm not sniffing the DVD much. Let's just go to opening credits. Hi, I'm Conan and I love movies. In particular, gay movies, and I've got a lot of them. So every week, I'm going to review a different gay movie and discuss with you various ideas and thoughts that this movie brings up, as well as whether it's worth checking out or not. So why don't you join me and come out to the movies? Hi everyone, welcome back to Out to the Movies. And this week I'm reviewing Trick, which is a popular 1999 film about Gabriel, a young musician who writes musicals, and a night he decides to sort of go out on a limb and he meets the sexy go-go boy Mark. And then the rest of the film is basically about them trying to find a place to go have sex. And in the process of this, of course, they end up falling for each other and romance blossoms. So, what do I think of Trick? First of all, it is so 90s. Like, they have the best friend, Gabe's best friend is played by Tori Spelling. You can't get much more 90s than that. Her character, Catherine, is basically Gabe's best friend in the world. She sings his songs at workshops, and she basically is kind of supportive of him while also kind of being a little bit narcissistic. And the whole film is kind of built around all these very 90s looks. It looks so of its era, but it also kind of, to me, is classic of gay films of that era. Now, a lot of gay films in the 90s are very they're trying to be more mainstream, or they're trying to appeal to mainstream audiences, and Trick is a very curious film because it wants to be about romance, and it wants to be a screwball comedy romance. So in the classic sort of 50s style screwball movies, you've got two characters who want to achieve something, and they're kind of a bit chalk and cheese. So there's potential for drama between the two characters, and there's potential for drama of the fact that the goal that the two characters are trying to achieve is almost unachievable because every step of the way something gets in the way of them getting to where they want to. And the whole idea is that by the end of the film, they come to realize that what they wanted wasn't the thing they actually wanted, but what they did want is something that they can get from each other. Now, in classic screwballs, the whole the whole style of the film is very heightened and exaggerated. So much of the comedy doesn't just come from the situations, but from how ludicrous the responses to the situations are. Because the whole thing is that nothing is really getting in the way of these characters except for themselves. And so it becomes hilarious because we keep seeing all these events happen that seem to be preventing them from achieving the thing that they want, but the realization eventually comes that they're the thing that's preventing them from making progress. A really classic latter-day screwball, almost farce, is Quick Change with Bill Murray and oh goodness, I feel so bad for forgetting her name. Gina Davis. That's a classic screwball because it's all about a bunch of crooks who rob a bank and then they just need to get out of New York. But no matter how hard they try to get out of New York, things just keep getting in the way, and it kind of drives them kind of insane. And the really interesting thing about that film is that while there is real-life dramas being played out between the characters, it's a comedy, and it's a screwball comedy, so of course everyone around them is heightened. So they're all behaving in ludicrous ways that are not really real. And that's what adds to the comedy. Now, I bring all of this up because I feel one of the biggest problems Trick has is that it's not heightened. It's very 90s in that 90s indie trying to be grounded, but it wants to be a screwball comedy, and you can't actually be both because screwball comedy requires characters to make ludicrous decisions. And every so often, Trick will gently toy and tease with that style, and then it pulls back. And that's a real shame because there's a lot in the script that I think would have been a whole lot funnier if it had been played a little bit more comically rather than dramatically, which isn't against the cast. The cast are great. They're all really wonderful characters. Tori Spelling clearly is someone who understands screwball comedies, and she does put the most effort in providing the hammiest acting. And that's not because she's a bad actor. It's because she understands what hammy performances are, and so that's what she delivers. Unfortunately, no one else seems to have gotten the memo. So that's one issue I have with Trick, is that it wants to be one thing, but it tries to be another. Then there's the romance. Now, queer film always struggles with romance, and I think a lot of that comes from the fact that we don't have a lot of content to draw from that's healthy romance. Either we see a lot of gay films that try too hard to be mainstream romantic comedies, which is actually not good because mainstream romantic comedies teach you some really bad values, not the least of which is it's okay for guys to stalk girls if they're in love with them. Now, Trick doesn't have this, thank God, but it still feels like it doesn't quite understand romance, which is ironic because one of the key issues facing Gabriel in the film is that he's written this musical that has a song about two people falling in love, and he gets challenged that it doesn't feel believable, and that's because he doesn't believe that you can fall in love in one night. And so the challenge that gets laid to him is that to make his work better, he needs to experience what it really means to fall in love, like lightning bolt from the sky, first love kind of feelings. But then the film doesn't really deliver that, but it does. And I'll get to that in a moment. So it's all sounding like I'm a bit down on Trick. I do want to sort of first say that I really like Trick as an independent film. It's got a really beautiful sense of let's just get out there and make a movie. It's got good performances, and the idea behind it is great. Unfortunately, my problems come from a few factors. One is story. One is representation. And the other is that it just doesn't feel like the director understands comedy, which is a problem because it never really feels to me like it's as funny as it thinks it is. And it needs to be funnier. And the issues aren't really, I feel, in the script. The script feels to me like in another director's hands, it might have been just a rollicking comedy and just brilliant. I don't think the problem's with the cast because they show in the moments where the film works, they show that they've got the ability. I think the problem lies in how the film is shot and in how the film is directed. Because it's trying too hard to look real, And it's a screwball comedy, so it shouldn't be trying to look real. It should be embracing the screwball all the way. But let's get back to story. So the story of the film is really following two types of characters. We have Gabriel, he's not quite the acceptable gay, but he's a guy who is not really big on the gay community. And this I'll get into a little bit more detail shortly, but there is a key pivotal scene in the film that basically sums up my problem with that, and that plays into my feelings about representation and how this film represents the gay scene and the gay community. And then you have so you have Gabriel, he identifies as gay, but he doesn't identify with the gay community. Then you have Mark, who's a go-go dancer from a nightclub, who clearly is representative of the gay scene, the gay community. He knows a lot of people in the area. He's very sexually confident, whereas Gabriel is very sexually inexperienced and sexually uncomfortable and very shy. And so this is a great setup for a romance, because these are two guys with very, very different views on what love is, on what romance is, and what being gay is. And so you've got a lot of potential for these two characters to have a good kind of back and forth that never really eventuates. Mostly because Gabriel just wants to get his rocks off because Mark is smoking, and Mark wants to get his rocks off, but is beginning to fall for Gabriel. And as the film progresses, Gabriel realizes that he has feelings for Mark, but then he goes through all these stages that I'll get into later. The problem is that pivotal scene I was talking about. So there comes a point where they're kicked out of a room and they're not sure where they're going to go next. And the two characters are sitting outside on a doorstep. And Gabriel admits that he used to not like gay people. And he felt culturally different from gay people. And that he felt that he wasn't part of the community. And he says, and when Mark sort of says, well, you know, you had sex with guys, so you're gay, Gabriel points out that he's not like all those bleach blonde hot guys who go out clubbing all the time and hook up. And then he goes off on a tangent about how he's kind of had a boyfriend but didn't have a boyfriend, and it didn't really work out, and he thought the boyfriend was cheating on him. And basically this very negative story about a very negative experience with a guy. And Mark stands up and is basically, he's about to leave, as you would be. Because he's not showing he's just not interested in hearing all of this. And as he stands up, he sees a guy walk by who is hot, bleached blonde hair, and clearly a nightclubber. And then Gabriel stands up between Mark and hot bleached blonde guy and basically begs Mark to stay hanging around him and that they're going to make this work. Now, why this is a pivotal scene for me is because this, to me, is the core problem with the representation and narrative of Trick. What Trick seems to be saying is that the go-go nightclub lifestyle of Mark's is the bad lifestyle. And we're constantly showing nightclubs where whenever we're in nightclubs, all the gay guys are kind of very shallow, or they're kind of stupid, or they're just mean. And Mark is constantly shown as being drawn back into that crowd, but he's always drawn back towards Gabriel. And by the end of the film, Gabriel doesn't really make any concessions, but Mark does. And I have a problem with that. Because it feels to me like Trick wants to present the gay community and gay culture in a way that's, it wants to be able to say, oh, look, we embrace being gay is all cool and it's wonderful and we have all our own problems. But at the same time, the film constantly feels like it's down on the gay scene, that it's down on gay culture, and that really gay men should be having this kind of dreamy idea of love that Gabriel holds on to. But at the same time, it doesn't, because it also wants to acknowledge the sexuality of gay culture. And so I'm left kind of torn at the end of the film, because I'm feeling, okay, this has a happy ending. It's talking about relationships, which is good. We don't have a lot of good role model relationships in gay media. Often, particularly in this era, the 90s, it was common that you'd have a story about two gay characters who fall in love with each other, but they can't quite make it work because one of them's usually closeted and the other one finally accepts their gayness, comes out and is strong and independent and on their own. And so a story where the two guys actually end up together at this point in the history of gay cinema is a rare thing. So that's a good thing that Trick does, right? It's saying, yes, gay men can have relationships. But it seems to be inadvertently saying gay men can have relationships if they reject the community. And I'm sure that's not really what the intended message is, but that is kind of how it comes across because of how the gay scene is represented. And it needs to be stressed that the gay scene and the gay community are not the same thing. They're related, but they're kind of different parts of a bigger whole. So the gay scene is pretty much the nightclub scene, right? These are the guys who go out clubbing. They're the guys who are usually in-your-face gay, and they're proud of themselves. And that's the scene. And that's often, for many gay men, their first experience of gay culture is the club scene. But after that, you have the greater community. And the community consists of all the people who are just gay, and the people who are involved with community groups like Rainbow Youth and other outreach groups like Love is Love, and they're all the people who fight for gay rights. The gay community is also all the social groups that get together, like the gay sports teams and the gay bookstores and all of those other people. The gay community is a much larger thing, and there is a culture that comes with that community, and that culture is shared with the gay scene. And yes, the gay scene has some shallow people in it, and the gay community has some bitchy people in it. All subcultures and cultures have, the people who are bad. And that's just a part of life. And it's frustrating when we see gay club culture and gay community shown by other gay people, particularly in gay films, as being bitchy or shallow or deceptive, or even just stupid. And that is how it felt Trick often showed that community. They were not shown in what I felt was a healthy light. There was not enough balance there. And Gabriel really is not a healthy gay character. He's very insular. He's very uncomfortable around other gay people. He even is uncomfortable about the fact that he loves writing musicals. He has a line in there where he basically says he writes musicals, but he's not that kind of gay. And this is all really kind of negative messaging. And for me, that kind of spoils Trick, which for all intents and purposes is really kind of down on gay culture. It's happy with being gay. It's happy with two guys falling in love, but it's not happy about them being part of a greater community, and that is really upsetting. So yeah, I find it an interesting film on that front because it's trying to be this screwball comedy that's light and airy and fun, and instead it just gets dragged down by all of this subtext and unintended messaging that I'm not sure that was what was intended when it was written, but it's just how it kind of ended up coming out. And yeah, that's a sad thing, and it's really, really unusual. And it makes it hard for me to recommend Trick as a film because ultimately all of that drags the humor out of the movie for me. It just stops being funny, and it just kind of comes across as rather exhausting. And then by the end of the film, I'm just sort of half watching it because while I care about the characters of Mark and Gabriel, I find Gabriel's friend Catherine just gets worse as the movie progresses, and there's not enough done to build her up as a character. Her story kind of isn't really fleshed out enough. And Mark starts off as being really distant and cold, but he quickly becomes a very gentle and likable character, whereas Gabriel starts becoming really annoying in my mind. He just becomes more and more self-obsessed, and by the end of the film, I just don't feel he has evolved enough from the course of the events to really justify Mark giving him a chance. Even to the point that when Mark does trust him with something, his first act is to test whether Mark is telling the truth or not. And again, that's not intended to paint Gabriel in a bad light, but it kind of does paint him in a bad light. And yeah, I'm very curious what they're going to do with the sequel, because there is plans to do a Trick 2 now, and I wonder if, because of the era that Trick was made in, that a lot of the sentiment that was floating around in that era kind of affected the film, and whether the sequel will be a very, very different experience in this age where we have different expectations of our gay content and different expectations of gay media. And I wonder if the new Trick will show these characters having evolved into something more positive. So that will be an interesting thing to observe. So yeah, that is my review of Trick. It's a bit of a ramble, but that's mostly because it's a film that I was disappointed with. I was expecting more, and I just don't feel it delivered on the promise that it made. So that leaves me in an awkward position, possibly my most negative review yet. And I will have to say that. I think it's weird because I like it. I still like the movie. And I'm okay with watching it. But yeah, I don't feel like it understands what it actually is saying. And for a film that they keep using the terms savvy, witty, and madcap, I did not feel that it was any of those things. I felt that it wanted to be, but it didn't make it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. So, next week, I will be reviewing yet another film. And I am curious as to which one you would like me to review. So keep an eye on the Twitter at twonakedgayguys.com. I will put up 4 more options of films for review, and we'll see what comes out next week. Maybe I'll like it a little bit more. Keep tuned to this channel. We've also got the next episode of Two Naked Gay Guy Briefs coming up shortly. So until next week, ciao. And really do let me know your thoughts on Trick. What worked for you? What did you like? Or do you agree with me? Has this film not aged as well as it could have? I'll catch you later.